I recently read the following quote: resilience requires the ability to learn from and bounce back from failure. End quote. So, what does that look like when the failure is suddenly our inability to show up as our best self? From healthcare to self care, some would argue that the evolution of American medicine from the roaring 1920s to the roaring 2020s is challenged to provide a complete cornucopia of care. Quote, throughout the 1920s, new technologies and new science led to the discovery of vitamins and to increasing knowledge of hormones and body chemistry, end quote. In the 2020s, the cornucopia of medicine must include self-care breakthroughs that promote resiliency. Resiliency for emotional and mental well-being, especially during trauma-inducing episodes, is at the heart of the evolution of medicine. Traumatic events are often triggered by incidents referred to as amygdala hijacks that sometimes activate a fight or flight response to highly emotional and stressful situations. Situations characterized by fear, anxiety, aggression, and anger that can generate illogical and irrational comebacks. Whether leading self or leading others, identify and establish self-care goals that not only build your emotional intelligence, but also drive your ability to be resilient. Kimberly, what are you sharing today about these insights?
Yes, Twiana, self-care is at the heart of our wellness. We all can act out with an emotional response or impulse when we are triggered by someone or something that attacks ourselves or our connections, and we fail to do the self-check before we react to this amygdala hijack. Recently, we all witnessed the Will Smith moment, I call it, at the Oscars ceremony, and Will's emotional response to Chris Rock's comment. I imagine that Chris Rock also had an amygdala hijack. I was just hit by Will Smith. Yet his response was quite different than Will Smith's. What sets us up for those reactive, unprofessional emotional responses that put our emotional brain in full, absolute control? Could it be the visually and globally connected world, the prevalence of self-promotion or self-display on social media, our own health, wellness, and stress levels, and ceaseless noise of monumental expectations? How can we come from a different place in those moments or catch ourselves before we do or say something we're going to regret? Chris Rock appeared to catch his amygdala hijack moment. He paused with a moment of self-awareness, which led to his self-regulation and self-restraint. Moreover, in his recent public engagements, he continues to state that he's processing and will continue to process what happened that night and his response to it. I believe national television provided us with this poignant moment as a learning lesson for all of us to take inventory of our own emotional health and well-being and determine if we have our own self-awareness and self-control running at the highest capacity, or, as you said, Twiana, show up as the best version of ourselves. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Kimberly, this topic reminds me of Robert Sapolsky's book, Behave. Not only does Sapolsky talk about the brain chemistry of amygdala hijack at the moment of hijack, but he also talks about the preconditioning of the brain leading up to the hijack and the influences that result in those predispositions, many of which you just mentioned. When your amygdala is hijacked, the emotional part of your brain takes over and disconnects from the reasoning part of the brain. In that state, we can lose our ability to assess the consequences of our actions and can lash out in highly inappropriate ways. Many times our amygdala is hijacked out of a very strong fear of experiencing feelings of shame. Humans will go to great lengths to avoid feelings of shame. Ironically, their behaviors often lead to a greater shame than the one that they were trying to avoid in the first place. Twiana mentioned that greater self-awareness can help us identify the triggers for amygdala hijack. I think that the Enneagram is a terrific tool for becoming more self-aware. In fact, there is an Enneagram type that is highly sensitive to feelings of shame, for instance. Once you know your Enneagram type, you'll better understand your possible triggers. That self-awareness can help you recognize when your amygdala is at risk of hijack and help you avoid taking an action that you may later regret. Chris Rock's behaviors have served as a great model of self-restraint, holding back on lashing out with an emotional response. I really applaud Chris Rock's conduct throughout this entire incident, and we all have a lot to learn from this.